showing movement towards Kamala Harris. Now we get some swing state polling showing something very similar. All right, these are in the Great Lake battleground states. We're talking about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. You go back to May, what'd you see? You saw that a pretty tight race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but you see more red than blue on the screen. Of course, all three of these states were states that Joe Biden carried last time around. You saw a 3-point lead for Trump in Pennsylvania, one well within the margin of error in Wisconsin, and then a 1-point lead for Biden, Michigan. But look at where we are now. This is the type of movement the Harris campaign has been looking for. Look in Pennsylvania, a 4-point advantage. Wisconsin, a 4-point advantage. Michigan, a 4-point advantage. And in all three of these states, we see clear movement towards the Democratic nominee. I will point out we're still in no clear leader land in this particular instance, but the Harris campaign has to love this movement. 7 points in Pennsylvania, 5 points in Wisconsin, and 3 points in the great state of Michigan, all moving towards Kamala Harris. And she has the advantage in all three, although, again, no clear leader within the margin of error.
Right. Important to keep that context in mind. Now, these aren't the only swing state polls that are showing Trump slipping.
That's exactly right. You know, if we were just talking about the New York Times, Siena College, I'd say, you know what, hold on a second, hold on. You know me, Jessica. You know that I like to see confirmation of an individual poll. So there were Ipsos polls that were conducted in these same states, and I want you to look. This is an aggregate, of course, across Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. You go back to June, what you see? You saw Trump on average up by 2 points, very similar to what we saw in the New York Times Siena College poll. Look at where we are now, the August margin between Harris and Trump, and look at what we see here. We see Harris up by 2 points. Again, no clear leader, but that 4-point movement, very similar to what we saw in the New York Times Siena College poll. And this is what we're seeing across the polling data. It's not just one poll. It's not just one pollster. It's across pollsters. It's across polls. And, of course, in these Great Lake battleground states that are going to be so important, we're seeing this 4-point move with, instead of seeing a small Republican lead, we're seeing a small Democratic Party lead, and in this particular case, a small Kamala Harris lead over Donald Trump, the reverse of what we were just seeing just 2 months ago.
Yeah, and of course, the reason we care about these particular states so much is because of the Electoral College and how this all is decided in the fall. What does this data mean for the Electoral College more broadly and how that's playing out?
Yeah, so look, this is what we're talking about, the race to 270 electoral votes. And I want to give Kamala Harris those Great Lake battleground states where she was leading, although within the margin of error. We're talking about Wisconsin, we're talking Michigan, we're talking Pennsylvania. If we give those 3 states to Kamala Harris, even if she loses in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, which are far from guarantees, these, of course, were 3 states that Joe Biden carried last time around, but in which the Democrats have been falling a little bit short of their 2020 numbers, at least in recent data, at least when Joe Biden's in the race. But if we give Harris Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, look at that. She doesn't even need these Sunbelt battleground states. She gets to exactly 270 electoral votes. So the fact is, when you see those polls in those Great Lake battleground states, and you see that Harris has turned the tide around from basically, you know, Donald Trump being slightly ahead to now Harris being slightly ahead, that could be the entire ballgame. Even if she loses down south, if she wins up north, that's enough. That gets her to exactly 270 electoral votes, and that's why those New York Times Siena College polls, as well as those Ipsos polling data, why it means so much.
And so here we are. We're probably, I'm ballparking it here, 80-something days away from the election at this point. How much can things change from now until the election?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of movement in the last 2 to 3 months, and I just want to note that the movement that we've seen towards Harris could easily reverse itself. And the reason I say that is because how far off were the polls on August 10th compared to the final margin in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? On average in 2016, the average from the polls at this point to the final margin, 9 points across those 3 states. How about in 2020? Look at that. The average movement from the final poll, from the polls at this point to the final margin, look at that, 5 points. So the fact is, yes, Kamala Harris may be slightly ahead right now. Again, though, a race in which there's no clear leader within the margin of error, but that could easily turn around in the final, let's say, a little bit less than 3 months to go. There's still a lot of campaign to go. We got a Democratic National Convention to go. We probably have at least one more debate to go. So still a lot can change. But at the end of the day, Jessica, if you are the Democratic Party and you were looking at the polls 2, 3 months ago and you compare it where you look now, I think for no doubt they'd rather look at this picture in August than the picture they were looking at May. It's a much more rosy picture for the Democratic Party, but still a lot of campaign to go, Jessica.
Yeah.